Welcome, FPL Surgery listeners, to 8 Simple Rules. My name's Rich, and as always, I'm joined by Dave. 8 Simple Rules was something Dave devised after a horrific season a couple of years ago, or horrific even by his standards. That was a little harsh. Sorry, Dave.
Just keep going. Smile through it.
We'll continue. So Dave put together 8 rules to try and improve his rank, and last season he took it to 8 different managers. He, discussed them, and it did improve his rank. So we're doing this again with the same 8 managers and slight tweaks to the rules. Now, this week, we're very lucky to be joined by, Matthew, who's got some of the best ranks out there, consistent ranks as well. How are you, Matthew?
I'm great, thanks. Yeah, really starting to get a bit excited for the new season now. It's starting to feel real, isn't it? From, a few weeks of saying, it's too early to even try a draft to like, actually, it's not that long now.
Yeah, 100%. And I just want to point out, and I didn't find this out till recently, is that you have such a consistent rank and you're so good at this game that the stars on your logo actually indicate how many top 10Ks and top 1Ks you have. Is that right?
Well, the 3's 500's not 1,000, but
even better.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
How cool is that?
It's meant to be one of them subtle things. If you know, but I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Now everyone knows. But how good is
puts
that?
Brazil to shame, doesn't it? The number of stars. Yeah.
Every time I pass Celtic Park, they've got that 1 star, and I'm always like, yes. And then like you've got 40 stars or something on your logo. Amazing. So you said that you're excited to get going. Have you made many drafts, or have you been like constant at it, or are you still kind of laid back a bit?
No, I probably just made one draft about a week ago, which I put out on the Fantasy Football Hub article. But that was kind of called early thoughts. So gone through the positions and the sort of main thing, like a short list and things I'm thinking of, and I come up with a draft.
Right.
And then I probably tweaked it a bit since then. Probably yesterday when the Ings news sort of came out of nowhere, and then because I looked at him, I sort of also changed a few other things, and it ended up looking a little bit different. So
yeah, as it always does.
So then were probably 2 main. I don't really like just tweaking, and because it's gonna, let's face it, it's gonna change again after the next weekend's set of friendlies, isn't it? Something will come out of the woodwork there,
Yeah, and even the transfer window. I mean, at the time of recording, we're getting all this stuff about Messi might be leaving Barcelona, and so much can change. And I think Dave asked you that question because he likes to try and steal people's drafts or get inspiration, as he calls it.
Yeah. But, well, I'm on another, would you believe it, another video, tomorrow with Fergie, for the Hub.
Oh yeah, nice. So
that'll be the official reveal of my current draft, which is bound to change. So that's tomorrow morning. So I guess that'll come out sometime tomorrow afternoon. Or
amazing.
Right. Yeah. So the first question we asked, so before we get into the rules, Matthew, it's I think it's the hardest one to answer. But what kind of manager would you say you are? How would you describe the way you play?
I think fairly conservative, but I think a lot like most serious managers, it's more tend to be, I think, more than the other way around.
Yeah.
But then I also sort of I tend to I try and be conservative, but then I tend to get these like urges or instincts to like have to get a certain player, and then I can't sort of relax until I've got them, sort of thing. So I think it's like you see a player playing in a match or even highlights, and you think, they just got to get them, and then they're playing well, and then you maybe look at the fixtures and they got a couple of good fixtures coming up, and so kind of try and mix it up between covering the sort of main threats to my ranks type of thing, but also getting players that really fancy, sort of thing. And I've got like a few sort of principles that I think I can talk about later when we get to sort of my rules, if you like.
Yeah. I like that you did this because we were talking earlier before we started recording, and you said you didn't really like the idea of rules, which I thought was amazing coming on 8 Simple Rules and doing that.
I know,
but it's great because what it does is gives another angle on how to take these, because obviously these we made them to try and make things a bit more easier and straightforward, and also so you can look at them over and over again in the season and kind of take solace in the fact that no, we're doing this and this is what we're trying, and we're going to see if we can take it right to the end. But I absolutely understand the sentiment of not or trying to follow things but not as strict just in case.
I prefer to think of things as like principles or guidelines, because if you sort of view them as rules, it can make you too inflexible, and there'll be times when going against your rule might be for the best, and if you've got in your mind that that's a rule, you kind of think, I can't do that, so it's just a little bit of a different mindset, I suppose.
I agree. It's great because like usually we'll get caveats for the rules when we get into it, but you have caveated this entire video.
The whole thing.
That's really good. But Rich, shall we start? We'll get on to rule number 1.
Yeah, so the first rule, and maybe you'll have caveats for this one. So it's a template team to start the season.
Well, this is an interesting one for me because last season, I don't know if you remember, Rich might do, because I'm on the hub chat with him. I had a terrible start. So after about 6-7 game weeks, I was like outside the top 4 million, sort of ingrained in my mind. I think it was like 4.2 million, and I was there for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And then it seems very early, 6-7 game weeks, but then I seem to just spend the rest of the season just trying to like recover and get a half decent rank. I ended up at 29,000, which I was very happy with from where I came with, because if you looked at that time, the people who, some of the people who I was in the league with who finished in the top 10,000 were probably over 100 points ahead of me after 7 weeks. So you don't realise that being there just puts you so far out of the pace.
Yeah.
And what I sort of put it down to, well, 2 things really. So one thing I think I did have a lot of bad luck in the beginning, and I think Rich, I think you'll relate to that.
I can completely relate
with your season, because I think you had crazy bad luck, throughout the season. I seem to recall.
Yeah, well, I actually took some solace in the fact that players like you were slightly behind me after maybe, like you mentioned, about 7 or 8 weeks.
I was behind everyone.
And then but you turned it around and I didn't, and I just remember a few weeks passed and you were shooting up like slowly. It was like slow and steady.
It was, and I say that. So one was, I think there was bad luck in that, players that I'd kind of considered getting and almost got seemed to be the ones that people had and were doing really well. Like James Justin and Calvert-Lewin. I just thought, I don't know, I held off too long and things like that. Anyway, but the other reason I think I started off really badly is I tried to be too clever at the beginning, and like things like getting the double Chelsea attack stands out in my mind. Werner and Havertz. Now, I think if you got them this season, I think you got a good chance of them doing well. But last season, they were new to the league. They come from the Bundesliga. We didn't really know would they hit the ground running, and of course they didn't at all.
Yeah.
And then I was a bit stubborn, thinking they'll come good. I think especially Havertz. I think I kept for weeks and weeks. So back to your point, I think this season I am I've got that thing in my mind that I don't want to go too far away from a template, because I think my edge or strength, if you like, is more managing the sort of week to week humdrum of the season, well, rather than nailing a brilliant game with one side or a brilliant wild card. I don't think I ever sort of really nail them as well as I do just the general management side.
Yeah.
I mean, if you'd had even an average start, I'm sure you've thought of this already, but if you'd even had an average start, you'd have probably had another star for maybe the top 500.
I think I could have got sort of 1k if I'd have had a half decent start, like you said. And all I did was I just carried on playing my normal game. Whereas I think some people will like have a bad start and then start trying to do things differently, trying to chase punts and differentials. Yeah, maybe. But I just said, no, I'm just going to carry on playing my normal game and I'll just see where I end up. I'll just end up, if I end up a millionth, that's so be it. But
it's a testament to your normal game, to be honest, that you can still like stumble as much as you did at the start and then still save it. And hopefully throughout this video we can try and like extract some of that like strength, as you said.
So yeah, pretty much agree with that rule. And I think the draft that I've got, watch my video with Fergie tomorrow.
That's gonna be extremely template.
I think I'm covering the main template threats whilst also having some other players who've got some upside. So no further spoilers on that.
Well,
I'm so corporate with the hub, aren't I?
Oh no, that's okay. No, this is probably going to be coming out a little bit later, so we could actually link that video in this description. We could link, and you can go through that. That might be good. But just similar to what we're talking about with starting the season with template, do you, and this comes to rule number 2, do you use price points to balance your team at the start of the season at all?
I sort of do, and I sort of don't really. Right. I think where I do tend to do it, I don't know if this is using price points or just the way I prefer to set up my defense. I always like to have 2 players that I can play every week. So they might be premium players, unless a cheap one happens to come out somewhere. Yeah. And then sort of 2 or 3 cheap ones that I can rotate, either 1 from 3 or 1 from 2. With a non-playing one.
Okay.
Because I think that's like a good use of funds, really, because the ones you're paying the money for, you're playing every week, so you're getting value out of them, and then the ones that you're getting cheap, you're still getting each week you're still getting a decent player because you're picking the one with the best fixture, and the sort of might be like the 4.5 million defenders.
Yeah.
So I might have, I don't know, Veltman one week, White another week, Ayling. I haven't really exactly decided who them 3 are going to be yet, but
yeah.
So I like that. That used to be a way that I think a few seasons ago people used to set up like that regularly, and then it seemed to stop more recently, maybe because of COVID and stuff. But
I still like it. I mean, but then I think, when you get into the season, quite often, things just change, don't they? It's like, there's another good premium defender that you want, so you go to the 3 playing all the time. But at the beginning of the season, you tend to be a bit more tight on cash, I think.
Yeah.
Because players have been priced accordingly, so what they should be. The bargains haven't really emerged yet. But for the rest of it, I don't think I do that much. I suppose what I kind of do, I suppose, is like, say, there's like a load of players in a sort of mid-price midfield range that look okay. Yeah. And I think, well, you could probably get away with having 1 or 2 of them because if one's not doing very well, you can just pick one of the others who's doing well. So same with strikers. There seems to be a lot of decent ones around 7.5, 8 million, isn't there?
Yeah.
So having a slot for 1 or 2 of them is probably a good idea. So it's more that type of thing. Is that what you mean by?
Well, kind of, yeah. Price points largely came from the idea of being able to get to any player within 2 moves. So you would have someone at certain price points everywhere on the field, so that if someone emerged that was, say, 10 million, like Son all of a sudden became amazing, then it means that you can jump on them without having to like resort to surgery in a way.
But I sort of feel that you can do that with any team with 2 moves. Because say, I don't know, say you've got Bruno Fernandes and Salah, which is a popular structure, isn't it? And then you've got like mid-price strikers. Well, if you then want Kane, you just downgrade one of them enough to upgrade the striker. So that, you know, still
that's kind of cheating. I would say that as a cheating way of doing it, because I mean, obviously anyone could downgrade their highest priced player, but it's more like being able to get those players in without having to sacrifice your highest point. But obviously the prices this season kind of dictate how well that can pan out.
Yeah, I think I'm more looking at like, you know, what price points are there a number of options, and thinking, well, I'll pick one from that range because I can also switch to another one in that range.
I like that,
and also really just like picking the best team I can, and you know, if that happens to be a certain structure, so be it. And so I guess I'm kind of a bit on the fence on that rule.
Fair play.
This is quite a weird season for it, because Kane's the only premium striker, and then there's quite a drop off to someone like Kane.
Yeah, it's almost him or nothing, isn't it?
Yeah, basically. I think Aubameyang or Vardy might be the next one down, but
who's going to pick Aubameyang really? And Vardy seems to be slightly on the decline to me, so not sure. I don't know. He'll have no doubt have a good run, but they've also got a new striker, and they're going to create a bit more competition for minutes. You know, you can be rested a little bit more.
Maybe we need Lukaku or Messi to really shake things up a bit. But
yeah. But, I must admit, I'm not a massive Lukaku fan. I know he does really well in Italy, but I think it's not quite the Premier League, is it?
Oh, I used to love him in FPL. Apart from when he was at United. When he was at Everton, I liked him. And
that's true. That's true. Yeah. So maybe they play to his strengths more. Yeah.
Yeah, that was peak Lukaku for FPL anyway.
It was. Yeah. Him and Kane, wasn't it, at the time?
Yeah, it was. We need more of those premium strikers. We do, because I think that makes that rule a little bit more important. If you need to look to move up to those premiums.
Yeah, stepping stones.
Yeah, but our third rule. So it's simple captain choices. So when you are looking to pick your captain, how do you do it? Do you go for, you know, who's top of a poll, who's top of an algorithm, or do you look for those like differentials?
I don't really look at an algorithm. But I think what I do in reality is, you know, once the one game week starts, and you know, you get your team sort of comes up for the next week, like probably early in that week, or maybe like just after the sort of game week's finished, or, you know, the Monday, Tuesday sort of thing. I'll just have a look at my team for the next week, and just like go on instinct, really. You know, which player do I think could score big? Put it on them, and then what I tend to do is, and also do this for my team in general, is you know, does anything happen during the week, or, you know, quotes or anything come out, or anything which changes me from my instinct, you know, is enough to say, actually, there might be something better than what you first thought of.
Okay.
So, and if nothing does, then I'd say, well, stick with my instinct.
So when that changes from previous week to next week, and you have a look and your instincts start kicking, can any player get it, or is it like, do you only look at your premiums?
It probably tend towards premiums. I mean, like in the start of this season, I can just see Salah being almost a default captain. You know, when I looked at the fixtures, maybe I suppose like a Manchester City player in game week 2, you know, could be good upside against Norwich. But then depends, you know, who's fit and what they play game week 1.
Yeah.
But I just think Salah's just got the whole package, isn't he? Because he's playing for a team that, you know, is good attacking, and, you know, looked really good in the about third of last season. So if Liverpool can carry that on, you know, he's obviously a great player himself. He's selfish. You know, he takes penalty. He'll always, you know, pretty much take the penalties. So I think, you know, he kind of be my default at the moment. I think, unless there's someone else that really looks like he's going to outscore him.
Yeah, fair play.
But yeah, I pretty much agree with that simple captain choice. Don't overthink it, I suppose, is my watchword there.
Yeah, your principle. Yeah, no, fair play. I mean, it's a fairly common rule, but sometimes you do get those tricky managers that are like, you know what, I don't mind going for X player, and I don't care if everyone else is captain. But it's good to know that a consistent manager.
Yeah, I think there's like the one who I think is almost like the opposite of my style is Laterizer. Is it Laterizer? Laterizer. Yeah. Because I see like he'll go and like bring in players and especially to captain them. I wouldn't think of bringing them in. I just go like happy with my team. And I'm picking from who I've already got almost.
Yeah.
Whereas he'd go, well, Man City are playing so. I like the look of Sterling and that again in that particular game, and he's good at sort of spotting them opportunities. Or Werner, I think he captained last season a bit, and for better or worse, but that type of thing.
Yeah, it's almost like you keep it simple because you confine your choices to your team anyway. So that's good.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of come to that a bit when I come to my
okay, we'll move on then.
My eighth rule, if you like.
Okay, so the next one is no hits. Now, other than the obvious, which would be if you've got an injury or if you're coming up to a double and you're trying to get your team sorted for it, but in any other instance, are you for or against hits?
I'm generally sort of hit averse, but I don't really agree with the no hits being a rule.
Okay.
So things like I think especially quite early in the season, a player will emerge, a couple of players will emerge who almost like feel like must-haves.
Lundstrom's.
Maybe, just like such good value. The whole package or whatever is like you think I've got to get them in, and you want to get them in ASAP, and then I think it's fair enough to take a hit to like just change your team a little bit to get them in ASAP. Because probably the price might be rising as well.
Right.
And then the other thing I think is quite good for taking hits is where you do the mini wildcard, as they call it, where because I quite like to save a transfer wherever possible, and then but then once you save that transfer and got two, you might roll them for a couple of weeks maybe, but then at some point you say, actually, there's a good opportunity here now. If I make 3 or 4 transfers, I can almost transform my team without using your wild card. So
right, okay.
So I think that's another one. So, but that said, I don't take many hits, so don't get me wrong. I probably take 3, 4, 5 hits in the season.
Wow.
With the mini wild card. So you mentioned obviously doing 3 or 4 moves in a mini wild card.
So 1 or 2 hits.
Yeah. So do you sometimes do like a -8?
Yeah.
Or is that very rare? Or
no. I have been. I mean, I probably treat myself once a season. It's probably earlier in the season, and it's also typically where I think, well, my team almost needs a wild card now. But if I do that, I can almost reset my team and then save my wild card for a number of weeks.
Yeah. So it almost comes into play with the other caveat that you had for this rule, which was, early in the season makes sense. So if you combine those, you do a transfer game week 1, you roll a transfer game week 2, and by game week 3 or 4, you could do a mini wild card instead of what a lot of people are thinking about doing is using their early wild card, and it means you can save it. I like that a lot. That's smart.
I mean, let's, for example, let's say we get to game week 3 and then suddenly, Man City are buying Kane, Grealish, or Messi or whoever, and then you go, well, right, I'm either now going to have to like panic and just like blow my wild card, which is might be an option, or you might think, well, if I take a -8, I can actually get him, sort out a couple of other issues, get 1 or 2 bandwagons, 4 transfers, and I'm set. So it just depends.
I might actually add that, Rich, before we move on, as like a wee thing, is it worth wildcarding, or is it worth a -8 to keep your wildcard?
I really like that point Matthew makes, because if a wild card is worth more than 8 points,
Yeah.
or
It is.
you'd hope.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
mine
definitely is.
last season mine wasn't, for example, but in general,
in the right hands, Rich, it's
yeah,
worth
in the right hands.
8 points.
It should be the most valuable chip, shouldn't it?
Yeah, that's good. How far would you go with that though? If we took this to the extreme, like, is a -12 worth it?
No,
over a wild card?
I just think psychologically that's too much.
That's too much. Okay.
Yeah,
all right. I went too far. I went too far.
As usual.
One more transfer.
Even if it was like a -8 followed by a -4 the next week, and then so that's like could be like 6 transfers, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's like, because it's like the 4 for your mini wildcard, and then another 2 the next week. With 1 hit. That's 6 transfers in 2 weeks.
So are you, and that's not okay, or is that okay?
No, I'm saying that's probably psychologically okay.
Okay, right, okay. As long as we can wild card in 1 week, or we can mini transfer 6 players out in 2 weeks for a -12
across 2 weeks. Yeah,
okay.
And even better if you got one of them midweek games, so you're doing it, within the space of a few days.
Yeah, exactly. 4 day 6 transfers. Here we go.
Yeah.
So this rule is a thumbs down. We don't disagree. Don't agree with no hits, but
I probably don't.
I like that though.
I don't think that should be a rule.
Fair play.
That's good. Right. Well, rule number 5 is minimal core team transfers. So I guess this is the rule or the theory where you have as many spots as possible in your team where you don't transfer those players out. So a lot of people don't, for example, transfer goalkeepers out. They do a set and forget. So do you have a certain number of players in your 15 that are almost untouchable, barring injury, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I try to have as many players as I can that I'm happy to keep for a length of time. That's where sort of patience comes in sometimes. Yeah, but then you'll always have then some 1 or 2 punts that are more short term people, like the beginning of this season. Like a lot of people, I'm looking at Buendia. Is that pronounced right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and because they've got really good first 3 fixtures, and then I think it goes south a bit. So you got them 3 fixtures to get some points out of it, and then you can make the decision whether to keep him. Now, if he does really well, you might well keep him despite the fixtures going worse, because he's on form and he does look a good talent.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, if he doesn't do that much, you could see him being the one that I would say, right, let's swap him for one of the Leeds guys, or whoever's fixtures are sort of turning good.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, in general, I do agree with that, although I wouldn't have like a specific number. I don't know if I'd say just a sort of, not a plug really, but like, do you see that FPL Corf?
I know Corf. Yeah.
That the tool of like the like pyramid. I think it's called squad structure tool or something. I can't remember the name.
Yeah.
But that's the idea of that you like at the bottom you have a base of players who are long term, then people who are sort of semi long term, then punts, then mega punts. So
yeah,
I think that describes the rule quite well, actually. Obviously, Corf's done it in a much more, I guess, a more eloquent way with his diagram
and visual, which I liked. Yeah, so I think that explained it quite well.
Yeah, I'll blast that on the screen when we're editing, and I'll show it. It's called the squad balance tool. It's actually really cool.
That's it. Yeah.
So I can check that out, guys. But it holds the basic thing. But what I wanted to say was, do you purposely have a place in your? So right now it's Buendia, and then the next person after game week 3 could be Rafinha or whoever you're thinking about doing, and then. But a lot of people are saying that Rafinha is like someone who they're nailed, like they would consider one of their cores.
Just keep.
So do you kind of hotwire your team in that way, whereas this guy's going from punt to core, and then that means that this place is now going to be my punt? Or do you kind of like, is it puppet master in that way, or are you more like opportunistic?
Just like flexible, play it by ear flexibly, really, as time goes on.
So you don't assign patience to specific players?
No, not really. No, I mean, I'm generally quite patient in general with all players. So I hope that every player I have or bring in that I can keep for long term. Because obviously I think they're a good player, and that's why I brought them in, kind of thing.
Okay.
So not really. I mean, what I do each week in my article, but my article is basically trying to outline how my brain works. Effect.
Yeah.
So I have like what I call my most wanted list, and it's like each position, like the players that I most sort of would like to bring in. But it'll be a very short list. There'll be no more between the 4 positions. There's probably no more than 6 or 7 players at maximum. It might be 3 some weeks, and then also in each position I'll have like which players in my current team I'd be happy to lose, and then so by having those are the players I'd like to bring in and those players I wouldn't mind getting rid of. You can almost like come up with like a short list of potential transfers. I say, oh, okay, so there's a player I'd like to get rid of there, and someone who I'd like to bring in, about the same price. So, okay, so maybe that's a logical move.
I like
but then,
that.
Also look at the next few weeks. So maybe I'll keep him for one more week, but this other player's on my radar for next week.
It's good that you keep that list short as well, because obviously I guess something people could do is they could have a list of like 20, 30, maybe more players, and then it's not narrowing it down.
I know some people do have like watch lists, don't they, of like say 20, 30 players, but I try and keep it to like more like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Sort of thing,
Fair play.
Because really you can't bring in more than 1 or 2 a week unless just to go.
So you can. So not only do you keep your captain simple, but you also keep your transfers kind of simple as well.
Yeah, fairly. Yeah.
All right. We're going to move on to rule number 6 is plan your wildcard timing. How do you typically set up for your wildcard? Do you plan it in advance from the get-go, like game week 0, where we are now, or do you keep it?
So we're talking about game week, wildcard 1. Really,
yeah, wildcard 2 is usually placed in amongst the doubles, right?
Yeah,
that's how we do that one. So it's more.
So wildcard 1.
Yeah.
I sort of plan not to use it really. So
right.
I set up my team with a view to, I can keep that team for between now and Christmas, but
right, okay.
not the same team, but that team plus transfers kind of thing. I set it up with a view to not having to use my wildcard, but then obviously you've got to remain flexible. And this is probably another mistake from last year, where in hindsight I should have probably used my wildcard after about 3 weeks. A lot of people were using it at that time, and I don't know. Maybe I thought, I can get an edge by keeping it longer. But then I saw all the people who were using the wildcard around that time seem to then do really well.
Not everyone.
Yeah, we're 2 different sides of that coin.
There was a small. It's very strange because there were people in game week 3 who wildcarded and did very well from it. But then there was a lot of people like myself where we went heavy on Man City and Wolves, and it went almost the opposite way. So maybe it's slightly hindsight. I guess you'd have probably used it well. I guess that's the difference. But
I don't know. It was even things like people were then going, right, I'll now get Calvert-Lewin. And he proceeded to score every week for about 10 weeks. And I can't remember now the other players, but I know there's a few players that were like popular to bring in and seemed to do well.
Suchek was one, I think.
I think that's the 2 sides of this argument then, isn't it, really? Because obviously there's positives to keeping it and having it as a get out of jail free. And then there's the other side with planning your wild card, which means that you're not going to miss that opportunity that you've have previously aimed for. So if I'm saying I'm always going to wildcard game week 4 no matter what, it means that there's no ifs, ands, or buts. I'm wildcarding there, and there's never going to be a situation where I think, I wish I had my wildcard or whatever, because I'm almost forcing myself to take that roller coaster.
I mean, some people do that, don't they? Just thinking of my FPL mate, FPL Hibbo. He said I always wildcard between game week 3 and 4, and that's it. It's normally the international break, isn't it? Which is a good time to do it because you've got 2 weeks, to think about it. So I think there's definitely something to be said for that. But yeah, I think that what I would summarise is I aim not to use it, but I think you've got to remain flexible to using it, and that's where I went wrong last season, not being flexible to using it, because I kind of had in my mind I wanted to save it. Which
So how do you rectify that then for this season?
Just remember what happened last season, I suppose.
And moving on, amazing.
but then I think that's also linked to the first point, that if you've got a template team, if you start badly, then most people are going to start badly.
Yeah.
And then
wild card together potentially.
Yeah, that type of thing. So it's a bit boring, really, but
boring gets the stars on your logo. That's how it works.
Yeah.
I like that you mentioned that Hibbo always wild cards between game week 3 and 4, because it used to be really popular, didn't it? Because there were so many price rises during that week. But that advantage seems to have gone now, because
it never happened last year.
I think I always used to do it. Not like, I don't know, not like I didn't say before the season that's what I'm going to do, but I always seem to end up doing it, because I always have in my mind that that's a good time to do it.
Yeah.
And then you kind of almost condition yourself to right, it's first international break. Here we go.
Yeah, here we go. Get a million extra team value this week, and
but like you said, now it doesn't. If anything, the market it dies, doesn't it? Because everyone logs off.
Yeah, I think people realise now not to do transfers at the start of the international break, whereas I feel like before people were just doing it it was like a week or two of just people just doing transfers every day.
It's just the Wild West of transfers.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it?
Yeah, so if we move on to rule number 7, so this is no team or player bias. Now, obviously, I doubt you have much bias with Wrexham, for example, but do you have any biases that you lean towards, teams you wouldn't pick from, teams you always seem to pick from?
Well, for my sins, Manchester United is my team, as well as Wrexham, but there's kind of not much conflict between them two traditionally.
Not yet.
No. Yeah, you never know. But so there's obviously a big rivalry between Manchester United and Liverpool. Probably the main rivalry. Sorry, Man City fans.
Shots fired.
But I'll happily have Suarez, Sturridge, and Sterling that season when they all three did well. Mm-hmm. Happily owned all three and captained Suarez every week, and probably got one of my top 500 stars that season. Because it was a classic don't overthink it type of season.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I don't have any biases like that. My biases are probably more around type things of Leeds haven't got a very good defence, but when I actually look at it a bit closer, second half of the season, they were up there in terms of clean sheets. Not top, but they were in the top half certainly. Burnley a bit of a dull team. Try and win 1-0. That type of bias, and then you it's difficult to sort of get your head out of that and think actually Chris Wood is not a bad player to own. So kind of biased against teams in that way, whether you sort of stereotype them in your mind.
Right. Okay. So do you try and stop that, or is there? Because obviously we're going into this season, and Burnley to me are still boring, and I haven't even thought of that. I've been doing these rules for ages now, and I haven't thought about it as oh, you know what, maybe I shouldn't consider Burnley as being boring.
I think Chris Wood's not fit, is he, for the start of the season, or is he?
I have absolutely no idea because I haven't been looking because they're boring.
or is that the Olympics or something?
I think I saw today he should be okay because he was at the Olympics, but I think they got knocked out quite early.
Right, okay.
I think something happened.
It's I think not so much FPL, but in fan team, I don't know if either of you play that. I think he's quite a good price in that. So he's someone I would consider because he's very much their talisman, if you like, isn't he? He's very central to their attacks, and the way they play suits him. So yeah, I think I would sort of get him through gritted teeth. But you never really expect more than one goal, do you?
Yeah.
And I like going for players who've got that high upside.
Right. Okay.
I don't know. I can't think of an example now, but like a Man City player or something like that.
A more
maybe
glamorous player.
A bit more risk, but like they could get 15 points on the day.
That's interesting that you've taken it in that way, because obviously when we're doing team and player bias, and you touched on the fact that you're a Man United fan in Liverpool, but you have no problem with there. And then player bias for us would be like if one has burned you in the past, or Ings is a big example with the injury, and then no one touched him, and he had a really good season, I think 2 seasons ago now. But you have went straight to I have biases with like conditioning teams before the season even starts, with like prerequisites of being boring or being too extravagant or not defending well or anything.
But I do try and guard against it, but it is hard, isn't it?
Because we almost set our teams up against that. Because Burnley for us is if we're setting up our captaincies or our teams, we're thinking Burnley's maybe one to target this year. So it'd be difficult to then go into the season saying, I can't have these preconditions in my head, because then your whole team's in shambles.
I mean, if you're talking about getting burned, Havertz would have been for me at the start of last season, but I'd happily get him again now, because I think he's a different player. He's adapted to the league. You can see that towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
It's just that the early fixtures don't look that great, and I do like to sort of go for fixtures again, like most people. So it kind of just puts me off slightly, but I'll certainly bring him in at some point. So
I really like your take on that rule, because I guess it's almost the opposite of being too reactive. As in, I guess that's linked into being patient, because I'm just trying to think, if a random player scored a hat trick, a player we've never, I don't know, like McNeil, for example. Some people then might be like, oh, are we overlooking McNeil? Bring him in and captain him. And then, he never does it again. Yeah. I'm not saying engaged FPL managers would do that. But so I guess your thing almost protects against that. The fact that it takes a while for us to appreciate maybe Burnley are more attacking.
Yeah, probably. And actually if anything, I think I like supporting Manchester United. I think I tend to be like against that Manchester United players, because they've, as a fan, you sort of built your hopes up, and then them being dashed like for season, for years since Ferguson left, really. And some of the attacking's been so pedestrian, and under like Van Gaal and then Mourinho, and you're almost like wary of believing in it, and so. Like, well, Lingard obviously wasn't playing for Manchester United, but like I thought, it's Lingard. Come on, he'll stop scoring any week now. And I didn't bring him in, very particularly quick. I might have done in the end, but it was kind of when he stopped probably. And I think the same with was it Greenwood last season? I was like, yeah, he's a good player, but he's young. He's not that clinical yet. Stopped myself bringing him in when I perhaps should have done.
Yeah,
and even on Bruno Fernandes, probably should have captained him more than I did. So yeah, it's probably the other way, which is a bit strange.
That tends to happen with Man United fans. To be fair. You guys hate your club more than anything else.
I think it also, you're going to be happy if you don't have Bruno captain and he scores, you're not going to be disappointed. So you've kind of got that fallback a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll move on to the guest rule now, and you've got your principles that you wanted to talk to us about. Well, yeah,
not so much a rule, but I've got these sort of key principles that I've written about on the hub, well, the four principles are planning. So they're kind of obvious, if you like: planning, research, risk management. So that's obviously guarding against sort of threats to your rank and things like that, and then team management, as I call it. I couldn't really come up with a good name for this one, but my favourite one is the last one, team management. And so the type of things. So this is all about just like, not using your wild card or setting up a great team at the start. This is more about how do you sort of manage your team week to week. So some of the sort of sub principles within that, I think, is like, so I've kind of given them names like gold dust is like, if you look at the season, you actually get 34 free transfers for the season, which isn't a lot when you think about it. And then each one of them you use is like 3% of your allocation. So, I think you should treat each one like gold dust. Kaizen is the second one. So Kaizen is like a Japanese word for continuous improvement. They use it in like Japanese manufacturing. And this is about trying to continually improve your team, each week. So, and that's why because I like to do that. That's why I don't tend to like, just try and get the best players that particular game week, or switch between premium players, because I think while you're doing that, you're sort of using your transfers to get these big headline players, and the rest of your team's kind of starting to get dated. And then suddenly you think, oh, I either take a load of hits and I'm sorting this out, or blow my wildcard, because I've just not managed my team very well. Then the next one is patience. So when each player in your team, in theory, and if you're doing things properly, you should have brought them in for good reasons.
Yeah.
So, after a few weeks, really, most of them reasons should still apply. Obviously, the one thing that changes is fixtures, but I'd like to think they have reasons other than just a few good fixtures to bring in players. So it's just to think like why did I buy the player? Is that still valid? So okay, maybe they'll come good, and that does happen, doesn't it? You see people starting to sell a player, and then they score back-to-back goals, and you think, well,
yeah,
it
happens a lot.
So the next one is look before you leap. So this is basically saying that. Sorry, just look at my notes. The best way to avoid wasting transfers on taking out dud players is not to buy them in the first place. So just sort of think twice or three times before buying the latest bandwagon. Is it really the real thing? And obviously that's difficult and that's not easy. But do a bit of due diligence.
Yeah.
Remember that it's a squad game, so don't be afraid to use your bench some weeks. Just because you've got a player who's not really your first 11. Well, maybe one of your first 11 has like a 1 weekend injury, minor knock or a 1 week suspension. Well, trust your bench to step up rather than just going, right, take them out. That's another transfer wasted. And then the final one is sort of do nothing is an option. Because you always hear people saying doing nothing is not an option. Well, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
You like to roll your transfers a lot.
So them are my kind of things about managing your team better. I think the continuous improvement one is the one that probably most shines with me, really. Ideally your squad, obviously you'd like to think, you'd like to start off brilliantly, but it probably won't end up being brilliant at the start of the season. But it should, in theory, get better as each week goes by. Not
that rule. And I think maybe it's the first four of your rules just made me think about like Man City players, because say we knew someone was going to play, in a game, and I know it's very rare with Pep Roulette, but let's say Mahrez, for example, if you knew he was going to play, but he'd only improve your team potentially for 1 week, so you could argue he's weakening your squad. You're not getting stronger. Would that apply to Man City players, for example?
Yeah, I think quite possibly. I mean, it's hard to think, isn't it? So you actually come to that.
It's a very hypothetical question.
I think I would think about not bringing them in if it was a 1 week thing. Yeah.
I like this because it's almost like, so we always talk about how your thinking changes for the better when you start to look at who the worst player in your team is and upgrading them to someone better rather than looking for the shiny new player that everyone's got, right? But then so too you're kind of taking that to the extreme here by saying not only am I not going to be going for that shiny player, but even the player that I'm thinking about upgrading, one of my own players too, he needs to improve the squad overall, as opposed to, you know, having to downgrade someone who's already pretty good just to afford this person who was the likely option for the dud in my team. So you wouldn't even do that. You would think that guy's not even an option to you because of that, which is pretty awesome, actually.
Yeah. It's just trying to think, like, you know, is this transfers going to improve my team over the next, you know, 6-7 weeks? You know, does it make my team better? Not just like, you know, does it give me a better team this week?
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I get a feeling that on Twitter you see a lot of people who seem to be like trying to optimize their team for this particular week. And when you look at the team, you go, yeah, it looks really good, but you know, you can't keep doing that every week unless you're taking like 2 or 3 hits every week.
It is a trend, actually, I've noticed on Twitter. Sometimes you see people doing a lot of hits, but their team looks really good for that week, like you mentioned. And then I see, like, you know, managers who've been consistent like yourself, and it doesn't always look as shiny, but obviously it does the job.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
That is one thing that you need to kind of focus on as well, is when you look at your team and you see a horror fixture for one of your players, that's not a problem. It's not a fire as such. And because I know a lot of people are like, oh no, what do I do with X player? I've got such a bad fixture.
That's definitely a thing I noticed as well. Yeah, and really, like, for, you know, especially for attacking players, you know, if they're a good player, they can score in any fixture, can't they? I don't know, you know. I don't know, Kane, you know, say he's playing for Tottenham against Man City. Well, you know, you wouldn't back against him scoring.
No, definitely not. Definitely, and especially those players on
Rafinha,
penalties.
Yeah, or even like Rafinha, you know, 6.5 million against Manchester United game week 1. It wouldn't surprise anyone, would it, if he popped up with a goal? You know, so yeah.
That's probably why, and I'm trying to like link your rules and what you've answered together, and a lot of it is thematic, because you go back to the very start when you said that, you know, price points, you really only do it with your defenders, and that's probably because you're so used to just keeping your attackers the same for a large part. Like, you're so patient, whereas the price points only apply to defenders because you know the value of moving them around, and being a bit more flippant with your choices back there. It's very, very cool, and it's obvious that you've put a lot of thought and effort into it, and you've gotten to a place where you're so consistent that you're writing these principles that you kind of follow. So,
and obviously, you know, played for a long time.
you
know, so it almost becomes second nature, some of this, isn't it? And then it's actually quite hard to explain things sometimes, you know. You know, until you have to kind of write it down, you know.
And even then, I suppose there's always going to be outliers and stuff, and, you know, exceptions. But they were brilliant rules, Matthew. So thank you for bringing those, and adding them on to the 7 that we put together as well. Obviously, people can find you on Twitter. That's at FPL Matthew. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, brilliant. And did you have anything else you want to plug?
No, I think I've plugged quite enough. I think I've plugged quite enough things.
Well, we'll definitely put that your draft video in the description as well, so people could, we've talked about it enough. People can check out. This video will come out, I think, the Wednesday before the start of the season, so it'll be well and truly changed pretty much by then. But people can see what you were talking about at least.
I suppose one thing actually worth mentioning is that if I'm going to the FF Fest as well. Week on Friday in London, so if anyone is going there, feel free to come and say hello.
Now they know what you look like. There you
go. Be nice to put
everyone will be asking. Everyone will be asking you to rate the team, rate their teams, bringing you their phones. Like, please, Matthew.
yeah. I kind of get the feeling a lot of teams will be very similar. So
looks good.
They can change if people have been drinking, but
that's very true. That's
a good drinking game. You just pick someone in your head that you would never tell anyone ever to put in their team, and then just try and convince as many people as possible. Amazing. But thank you so much for coming on to our 8 Simple Rules, and we're gonna have to definitely get you on the pod at some point to see how you're doing in the rest of the season. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. You're very welcome, and I've enjoyed it.
Cheers. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Matthew, and thanks everyone for watching.
Up the pod.
Up the pod.
Bam.
That's
Done.
hard.